Morning, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny morning after some rain yesterday. We're getting clouds are clearing out and some really bright sun, hence the hat. And it's probably hard to see me here, I realize, with this light, but I'm going to be sharing my screen for most of this video today anyway, so it won't matter. Today we're going to continue to talk about Jeremiah. We talked about a little bit before in a previous lesson recently. Now, God called Jeremiah to be a prophet when he was quite young. And so the story of the Bible is told in the book of Jeremiah, and I'm going to read to you from chapter 1, verses 4 through 8, when God first told Jeremiah that he was going to be a prophet. The Lord came to me. Before I created you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I made you a prophet to the nations. Ah, Lord God, I said, I don't know how to speak because I'm only a child. The Lord responded, don't say, I am only a child. Where I send you, you must go. What I tell you, you must say. Don't be afraid of them, because I'm with you to rescue you, declares the Lord. So Jeremiah was the son of a priest. And when God told Jeremiah that God wanted him to be a prophet, he wasn't so sure he wanted to do this, right? He wondered if God was making a mistake because he says, I'm only a child. How can you be asking me to do this? But God told Jeremiah that God knew him before he was born. And Jeremiah was probably afraid. So he thought of that excuse. It's like, no, I can't do it. I'm too young. Because it knew that he wouldn't know what to say to God's people. But God promised, of course, to be with Jeremiah wherever he went and to help him when he needed help. And in the end, Jeremiah became an amazing prophet. So what do you think God might command you to speak about today? And is there anything have you ever felt called on to sort of act as a prophet, to tell people, to be an advocate for something and tell people whether it's about God or whether it's about something else that something about you're concerned about, like climate change, social justice? Have you ever felt compelled to speak to people and help them understand something that you're concerned about? And who might listen to you about these things and who might not listen to you? And why or why not? And sometimes, sadly, people don't listen to children or young people. And this is crazy because God knew. And Jeremiah tried to use that excuse, right? Like, I'm just a kid. What do I know? But God said, no, that's okay. You're a prophet and I will be with you. And today there are so many young people that do so many amazing things. And I thought I would share some of that with you. And just because you're young doesn't mean you don't have anything to say. And there was a day in Western culture way back when there was this whole children should be seen and not heard, right? And there's in one of our buildings, there's that sign that I love, children should be seen and heard. So this is today is in the spirit of that children have, everyone has a right to have something to say. All right, let me share my screen. Oh, wait a minute. Where are we here? Give me a second. And let me see if I can get this started. I think that's the one. Here we are. All right, so I had to start, of course, with the amazing Amanda Gorman. I mean, she's been in a number of my video lessons, as you know, and just recently I included some of her poems, some things that she wrote in reaction to the Uvalde massacre. And I mean, it's not much, I've already talked about her a lot, so I don't have to say a whole lot about her, but a wordsmith, a change maker, these are how she describes herself. And she was the youngest inaugural poet in the United States. And yeah, I will leave it at that, but she's amazing, right? All right, someone else you've probably heard of is Greta Thunberg. She is a Swedish environmental activist who's known for challenging world leaders to take action on climate change. And I mean, here she is, this young girl in Sweden, and she's known around the world for the climate change action that she has encouraged and done. And you might not know though that her activism began when she started small, right? So like if you're thinking it's like, but how did they do that? How did they have such a how could one kid have such worldwide impact like she has? But it all started with her own family. She persuaded her parents to adopt a different lifestyle and make different choices that reduce their own carbon footprint. And then it just continued from there. So you can start small and you never know what impact you might be able to have. Ahlstrm was a young inventor who changed the world also through his passion for environmentalism. When he was just 16, he created this thing called Algae Mobile, and I really want to sort of look into it more because it sounds fascinating. But it's a device that could convert carbon dioxide emissions from cars. It converts it into oxygen. Like, how amazing is that? And I'm curious how algae plays a role, because that's what algae does, right? It creates, it takes in carbon dioxide and turns it to oxygen. So it's fascinating that he was able to integrate this with vehicles in some way to reduce those emissions. And since inventing that, he's invented all sorts of other things, and he holds multiple patents. And he is now the CEO of a tech company that he founded called Hatch Apps. Malala, this is an amazing story. She attended her father's school in Pakistan, and it was one of the few schools in Pakistan that would actually educate girls and not just boys. But unfortunately, on her way to school one time, she got shot in the head by a Taliban gunman, and she actually survived it. Like that in itself is pretty amazing. And after that, she became an advocate for women's rights to education. And she's done so much along those lines that she became the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate. And she continues her campaign in the advocacy of education for girls through the Malala Fund. That's a pretty amazing story. Sophie Cruz, she was only 5 when she started getting international attention. So, small but mighty. When she was 5, she gave Pope Francis a letter asking him to advocate for undocumented immigrants in the US, like her parents. Now, sometimes actually, if you're a child, sometimes you sort of can have more power than adults, because if an adult walked up and gave the Pope a letter asking for anything, probably nothing is going to happen to it, right? But adults are more accepting of kids. They aren't threatened as kids like they might be by their fellow adults. So in some ways, kids have a certain power that adults don't have. And so when Sophie handed this letter to the Pope, he paid attention. And since that was just the start of her getting people to listen to rights for undocumented immigrants. Since she handed that letter to the Pope, she's been an advocate for immigration rights, and she's has spoken at Supreme Court rulings and the Women's March and other events across the country. So she's pretty cool. Joshua Williams, his concern was people living in poverty, and he was determined to help them. He ended up founding a nonprofit organization dedicated to stomp out world hunger, was the organization name, and break the cycle of poverty. And to date, Joshua's organization has donated over 2 million pounds of food to help thousands of families in need. Isra, she's making a difference through both environmental activism and racial activism. She's doing this and was inspired by the belief that every person deserves a safe and livable future. And of course they do. But instead of just thinking this, she took action on this, and she co-created the United States Youth Climate Strike. And whoops, what happened there? Sorry about that. I don't know if I hit something or let me get back here to, sorry, here it is. And there we are. Sometimes I add the slides in after I do the video, which is a little more seamless than how I'm doing when I actually present it, but this way you can still see my face too, and it's a little easier for me. So anyway, ISRA. So this US Youth Climate Strike organization, it has chapters all over the country to help youth get involved, get other youth like her involved in the fight against climate change. Jaslynn, I might not be saying her name quite right. She grew up in the Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota. And in doing so, she gained firsthand experience with the mental health struggles that teenagers can face. And I know that's even more so in many of the Native American reservations because they have so many more challenges to face. She co-founded One Mind Youth Movement to help youth who are part of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe to find support and resources when they're in trouble. And she also co-founded the International Indigenous Youth Council, which provides Indigenous youth with a space to stand together as leaders and to make their own voice heard on issues that are both faced across the country and issues in their own communities. So I think this is really cool because how many teenagers really think about or really see the mental health struggles that are going on around them, especially when they might be facing the same things themselves. But she was able to rise above that and see what was happening and do something about it. So that's pretty amazing. So finally, I'm going to end with someone who's no longer around. So this is not a modern youth or child, but I was fascinated by this because I didn't know this. So you know the system of Braille that allows people who are blind to read by feeling embossed dots in a page. Well, that was invented by a kid. I had no idea. His name was Louis Braille, and he developed the system when he was only 16. He was a very smart kid, and he went off to, he was in France, I believe, and went off to a very competitive school and for blind people. But what they did at the time is they would actually have to trace their fingers over the actual letters to read, and it took forever, and it was really difficult. And he saw the struggles of all his fellow classmates of this system that just wasn't a very good way to try to read with your fingers. Well, he became inspired by a system that was invented by a military officer, so served under Napoleon. And the soldier developed a system of raised dots that could be passed among soldiers so that they could send notes without that having to turn on lights, which might alert the enemy of their location. But it was still somewhat, it wasn't great. But Lewis was inspired by this, and he constructed a new method that was way more compact than what this soldier had invented. And his new method lent itself to also a lot wider range of uses. So it could even read music with the system that he developed, which I also didn't know that there was Braille for music, which there should be. And it was all done by this teenager, Louis Braille, and I had no idea. So I thought that was also pretty amazing. So, I'm reading about, there were so many others I could have included this, and I'm reading about all of them. And here I am, this middle-aged woman, and what have I done? These kids are doing these amazing things. But you could also look at this, because I know some of you watching this are also, maybe just young at heart, but also of older in years and inspired by these kids. They think, oh yeah, that's great, but I'm past all that. And you know what? I think another takeaway from this is that not only can young people do anything, but anyone can make a change, can make a difference at any time, right? And you don't have to have been doing it all your life. You can start whenever, at any point in your life. And if you're young, that just like it didn't stop Jeremiah from fulfilling his calling, then you shouldn't feel that you can't fulfill your calling because of your age, no matter what it is. So I will end there. Have a great week.